you know there's friends to be found. Lift your eyes and see the world.
Welcome to the Sunbury Press Book Show on the Bookspeak Network. I'm your host, Lawrence Knorr, the founder and CEO of Sunbury Press. Sunbury Press publishes print, audio, and electronic books under 20 different imprints in a variety of categories sold worldwide, wherever books are sold. This episode, we have author Daniel Joseph discussing his book about Lou Gehrig, the Yankee great, entitled Last Ride of the Iron Horse. Lou Gehrig Day, the first Lou Gehrig Day, is June 2nd, in a few days. This annual league-wide celebration will be a time to not only honor the legacy of this Hall of Fame first baseman, but to also raise awareness and funds to fight ALS. Dan Joseph is a Washington-based journalist, editor, and writer, and a senior editor in the Voice of America's Central Newsroom. He's the author of Last Ride of the Iron Horse, the first book to examine Lou Gehrig's 1938 season, Gehrig's last full year in the Yankee lineup as he began to battle symptoms of the fatal disease ALS. Dan is also a baseball historian and discovered the audio clip of Gehrig saying that, yes, Babe Ruth did hit a called shot home run in the 1932 World Series. I guess I should say, yes, he did call the shot because we all know he hit the home run. Dan has run the Africa desk in the VOA newsroom for more than 15 years, and he previously co-authored with Haroon Maroof, Inside Al-Shabaab, The Secret History of Al-Qaeda's Most Powerful Ally, a study of the Somalia-based Islamist militant group. Dan Joseph, welcome. Good to have you back.
Thank you, Lawrence. Glad to be here.
Wow, that was a lot to say to introduce you. But why don't we start with, not everybody knows Lou Gehrig. So if I wasn't much of a baseball fan or didn't know any baseball history, who was Lou Gehrig, if you could kind of give us an overview of Lou?
On the field, Lou Gehrig is, in my opinion, the greatest first baseman of all time. He was the anchor of the Yankee infield for about 15 years, from 1925 to, I guess, the beginning of the 1939 season, and he's most famous for playing in 2,130 consecutive games, which was the record for decades until broken by Cal Ripken in 1995. And he was a slugger, like almost no one else. He would usually hit about 35 or 40 homers a season, lead the league in RBIs, had a .340 lifetime batting average. And with Babe Ruth, he formed what is unquestionably the biggest 1-2 punch in baseball history. That was on the field. Off the field, he was known for being kind of a quiet guy who was happy more or less to exist in Ruth's awesome shadow. And what's interesting, though, is that at the time that my book is examining, 1938, at that time Lou was starting to move beyond Ruth's shadow. He had become a celebrity in his own right, and he made a movie. He made a Western, which we can discuss, and he was starting to make speeches, and he had become a celebrity sports figure, probably, if not the most famous, among the most famous in America. And then, of course, he was hit still in the prime of his career. He was hit by ALS. And the book examines how he coped with that as it slowly began to sap his strength and take away his baseball superpowers. And then the book examines how he coped with that and the reaction, which culminated in the famous Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day, July 4th, 1939, Yankee Stadium, where he made his memorable speech and said, "Today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth."
Yeah, probably one of the most famous baseball speeches. It has to be up there in the top 5, if not number 1.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Babe Ruth came and gave a farewell, and I don't know that that's as memorable. I don't know who else would be as memorable as Lou Gehrig's farewell.
Baseball speeches. I mean,
yeah,
that could be a good top 10 article. I think I can't think of anyone else who could.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway. Yeah.
So, I guess tell us a little bit about that 38. I guess it was the 38 season, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, Ruth had moved on. I guess he went to the Boston Braves for a little bit and retired, I think, in 34.
Yeah, 35 he went to the Braves.
35. So Gehrig is he's the focus of the Yankees offense at that point. I know they had some other great players as well, but he kind of inherits for a few years, Ruth's mantle and becomes the focus. So all of a sudden, were there any traces of any issues at all the year before or earlier in his career at all? Were there any hints of this terrible disease, or did this all come on all of a sudden?
Well, in 37, he looked as good as he ever did. He had like 37 homers, 154 RBIs. The Yankees won the World Series. He had a home run off Carl Hubble in the World Series. Hubble was a great pitcher. So it was like, really, there were no indications. And then he got to spring training in 1938. And sports writers noticed something, that he was getting hits in the exhibition games, but they were all singles. And, no extra base hits. And this was unusual. And Gehrig actually said later on that he was starting to feel weakness in his back. And then I found this quote. This was from about 3 days before the opening of the 38th season, where he was talking to a guy from the New York Post. And, the guy complimented him, hey, you have the highest batting average on the team for the spring. And Gehrig said, yeah, but I have to figure out what's wrong with my hitting. I'm taking a real cut at the ball, but it's the words he used, it's not taking the proper zoom. And I think what he noticed was it didn't have what today we would call the exit velocity. It wasn't flying off his bat the way it normally did. And,
right.
And that's why he was hitting singles. And then once the season started, he fell into this horrible slump. He went like 20 at-bats without getting a hit, and he ended the first month of the season hitting 109, and he could not get going for most of the season. I mean, he improved after that. He got up to a point where he was hitting in the 270s and starting to hit at least occasional home runs, but there was definitely something wrong. And the mystery, or the slump, lasted most of the season, except for this one extraordinary period in August, where for about 3 weeks he went back to being Lou Gehrig again, the real Lou Gehrig, and he hit. It were like a couple of weeks where his batting average was about 430, and he hit 7 home runs in 20. It was, I think, 7 homers, 7 doubles, 27 RBIs in a 2-week period.
Wow!
And then he double headers in 1 week because there were a lot of rainouts, and he played all 12 games, played 9 innings each game, and that's incredible feat even if you don't have ALS. He didn't miss, and this was all day games, all in the heat of August. He didn't miss a single inning. And then after this sudden reversal, last 5 weeks of the season, he suddenly became a singles hitter. I mean, he was hitting almost nothing but singles. He was walking a lot too, which kind of indicates to me he was trying to get on base other ways because he knew something was off. And in the World Series, which the Yankees won, I've heard it said that he was kind of a non-contributor. That wasn't really true. He actually did get hits and he did score runs, but again, it was all singles. The one time he tried to stretch a single into a double, he got thrown out at second. And the other Yankees noticed, what's going on with Lou? He's not hitting with any power. So
was he moved in the lineup at all? He probably was hitting fourth most of the time up to then.
Yeah, for most of the season he'd been hitting. Well, no, most of his career he had been hitting fourth. And Joe McCarthy, the manager, dropped him to sixth at one point, and then moved him back up to fifth. And that was, I mean, that was the whole season was something of a blow to Gehrig's psyche. He was really struggling trying to figure out what is wrong. He just couldn't seem to hit the way he normally did, and people thought he looked slow on the bases and slow in the field, which makes this period in August where he suddenly got the old snapback kind of very intriguing to me. I talked with an ALS researcher, and he thinks that Gehrig may have had a temporary ALS reversal during that time, which is a phenomenon doctors have studied, trying to document it, because apparently ALS patients do sometimes have temporary plateaus or slight reversals, and the cause of which is not clear. It's the whole season I thought was fascinating. That's why I wrote it. I thought it was just astounding that he was able to play the whole season, and he did wind up hitting 29 home runs, drove in 114, and played every single game while suffering with the early effects of ALS.
That's amazing. It might be the most amazing baseball season for a player ever when you consider the situation, because early the next season he's done, right?
He was done. Early 39, he got to spring training, and everyone noticed immediately he had gotten even slower and more clumsy than he hadn't really been clumsy in 38. He'd just been slow. 39, he was clumsy. He was dropping, routine catches. He could not seem to hit the ball out of the infield. And McCarthy kept him in there throughout the exhibition games because, he had the streak. McCarthy didn't want to break the streak. The regular season, he played 8 games, hit only 4 singles, none of which were terribly impressive. He was dropping throws from his teammates, and balls were just sort of clanking off his glove. And finally, he made the decision in Detroit on May 2nd of 39 to remove himself from the lineup. He couldn't bear the embarrassment anymore, and frankly, his teammates, not publicly but behind the scenes, had been grumbling that there's no way they could win with him playing first base. And Eleanor, his wife, she had quietly been lobbying that maybe it was time to sit down, and then she urged him to go to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and he went there for an exam, and that's when they found out he had ALS.
So when was Lou Gehrig Day back then, where he gave his luckiest man speech? What was that date? Do you know?
That was July 4th of 39 at Yankee Stadium.
So it was the season that he retired?
Yeah.
Had he officially retired before that, or was that his announcement?
It had been, after he went to the Mayo Clinic, the doctors released a statement saying he had ALS and wouldn't be able to play anymore. And that, I guess that would be the official retirement. After the game on May 2nd in Detroit, he never played a regular season again. Although it's funny, he kept working out. He kept hoping somehow that his gifts would return. And he would take infield practice and batting practice and things like that. And apparently there were a couple real turning points. One, he actually played in an exhibition game. The Yankees were in Kansas City, and they played a game against their top minor league team, the Kansas City Blues. And Gehrig went in and he played 3 innings, caught a line drive, but the line drive knocked him over.
Ooh.
And I think he struck out twice, and finally he removed himself after 3 innings. It was clear he couldn't play. And then a few days later, the Yankees were in Detroit again, and the Tigers were going to have an old-timers game. There was a old Tiger Hall of Famer named Sam Crawford who was taking batting practice. Now, Sam Crawford at the time was about 60 years old, and he was hitting line drives off the fence, against this batting practice pitcher. And then Gehrig stepped in against the same pitcher, and he couldn't hit anything stronger than an infield dribbler.
Wow.
And that's when he decided that, all right, I guess this is not going to go away. I better go to the Mayo Clinic. And of course, that's where they diagnosed him.
Yeah. And then how much longer did he live? It wasn't too much longer, like a couple of years.
No, he only lived 2 more years.
41.
He kept traveling. 41. He died on June 2nd of 41, which is one reason MLB is holding Lou Gehrig Day on June 2nd. The other reason being that June 2nd was the day that Gehrig took over as the Yankees' first baseman in 1925, and then didn't relinquish the position for 14 years. He only lived a couple more years after 39. One of the things the book covers is how he lived during those 2 years. The Yankees let him go. He traveled with the team for the whole 39 season and during the World Series, not playing, just traveling with the team. And then the Yankees gave him, the door, so to speak. And he got a job with the city of New York as a parole commissioner. And he did that work for about a year and a half. He kept working up until about April of 1941, and then finally it just got too physically exhausting for him to go to the office. And the book covers some of his activities during this time. He actually did try to stay in the public eye for a while in various ways. He made radio appearances. He would pop up at concerts and things like that. And then finally, the end came on June 2nd of 41 at his home with Eleanor and a couple other people by his side.
Now, he made a Western movie at one point. What year was that? And was that during his ALS issue, or was it before?
Well, the question is, was it before or after? I mean, was he really having symptoms at the time? He made it in January of 1938. He and Eleanor took a cross-country trip. They drove cross-country, and that's the opening scene in the book. Right. And then he made this movie, and people have watched this movie over the years and tried to decide, well, did he look weak in this scene, or were his muscles beginning to atrophy? And I've watched the movie, and it's my opinion that at that time he wasn't exhibiting any symptoms. There's a scene in the movie where he literally picks up a grown man and holds him above his head, and you can tell from the film it's not a camera trick. He actually picks up this person and holds him over his head. And you can't do that. I think, if you have ALS, even if you're using a very lightweight man.
I would agree. So tell us a little bit about what Major League Baseball is doing this year and hopefully every year hereafter on June 2nd.
They're trying to raise awareness of ALS, which is still kind of a rare disease, and also raise funds for the research of ALS. This whole movement started really a few years ago with the ALS Bucket Challenge, which is, and I'm sure everyone has seen this.
Yeah, I did that.
Oh, you did it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I jumped the ice water on my head. Yep.
What was that like? I never did it personally.
It's shocking. Yeah, it's and you got to make a video of it, and it's kind of funny. And I guess they're supposed to surprise you. Like my kids came up and dumped it on me. I knew it was going to happen, but you didn't know exactly what second the ice was going to hit. But yeah, it was a fun thing. Very, very clever, very creative promotion. Yeah.
Well, that raised about $115 million.
Wow.
For ALS research. And MLB, a couple of years ago, this movement started with to make June 2nd Lou Gehrig Day. There are only 2 other players in baseball who have days named after
Jackie
them.
Robinson.
Jackie Robinson, and then the other is Roberto Clemente.
Right.
So this will be the 3rd. And there was a couple. A broadcaster named Boog Sciambi. He used to be an announcer for the Braves and the Marlins, and he got behind this. And the father of Stephen Piscotty, who played for the A's, I think, or plays, I'm not sure. He got involved in this. These were people who had ALS impact, someone close to them, mainly. And the movement succeeded last year. The general managers in baseball got behind us and said we need to do something about it because ALS is kind of, as they said, it's Lou Gehrig's disease, which makes it baseball's disease. It's something that baseball is identified with and really is in a position to do something about. So on June 2nd, there will be commemorations in all the stadiums, and I'm sure on MLB Network, about Lou Gehrig and the disease, and they'll be raising money for to find a cure. There's, 80 years after Lou Gehrig died, there was still no cure for ALS. It's still 100% fatal. Sometimes people live 2 years, sometimes they live 5 years, but right now there's no defeating this disease. So that's why MLB is getting behind it and trying to do something.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to do, but when you say 80 years, it's like, wow, maybe they could have done this, decades ago. They could have started, but hey, better late than never. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I know at least one person who's suffering from this, is managing it with some medication that's extending his life, but I don't know the prognosis. I never ask when I talk to him, but I've noticed over the 10 years that I've known him, and he was diagnosed about 6 years ago, just a gradual, even under the medication, a gradual decline.
There are medications today that can slow the progression a little bit, but not arrest it. Yeah.
Right.
6 years. 6 years is pretty good for surviving with ALS.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, we did talk. We teased everybody with this called shot thing, so maybe I'll set you up for that. Tell us a little bit about that 32 World Series and what you've discovered.
Well,
recently.
This was in 2020. I love old time radio, and I like to dig up clips of baseball games and just baseball figures speaking on the radio, because a lot of the old timers, we don't know what they sounded like. They existed before the era of like post game interviews and celebrity things and TV. So now we knew what Lou Gehrig sounded like, but when I was researching the book, I was on the lookout for clips of him, and I found a reference to an interview Gehrig did just a couple days after the 1932 World Series. I contacted the old-time radio researcher who had it, and I think he didn't really realize what he was sitting on, and I paid him to make a copy of this show. It was the Rudy Valley Hour, or the Fleischman's Yeast Hour on NBC, and he sent me the clip, and bam, there it is, Lou Gehrig talking about Babe Ruth called shot, and according to Gehrig in this clip, Babe Ruth did call his shot. He did point at the center field wall and say, "I'm going to hit the next one out," and then proceeded to do that off the Cubs, Charlie Root.
Yep.
And this, it's funny. I held on to it for a while because I wasn't sure what to do with it. It didn't really fit my book. And I wasn't sure, do I just, October 1st, which was the 88th anniversary of Ruth hitting the called shot. I just decided midday, I saw a lot of people discussing it online. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to toss it out there. And I did. And I swear within 10 seconds, it had been retweeted by SABR, the Society for American Baseball Research. Mm-hmm. And within 5 minutes, it was just careening all over the place on Twitter. And since then, it's been viewed something like 220,000 times.
Wow.
But now for some people, Gehrig's comments settles the issue. Gehrig, he was on deck. Lou would never lie, so Ruth must have called his shot. And then other people say, well, yeah, Gehrig sounds like he's reading from a script. And or maybe he's just going along with the myth, which was started to be created the next day after Ruth called the shot. So the debate goes on. This probably has moved the needle a little bit more toward, yes, Ruth did call his shot. It would be interesting if somebody could take a before and after poll.
Did anybody ever write a book on the called shot?
I think there have been two.
Okay. Before this audio was available, or since?
Both before.
Okay.
So.
Hey, there's an idea. Hey, Dan, we're almost out of time. We're down to 4 minutes, so maybe you could give us a little bit on what you're working on and how we can find your work.
Well, the thing I'm working on right now, I'm working on a biography of Pete Reiser, who was the great Brooklyn Dodger outfielder in the 1940s. In my opinion, could have been a superstar on the level of Joe DiMaggio, Stan Musial. A lot of people said Reiser was as good or better than Stan Musial. He had this one problematic habit. He kept crashing into outfield walls. Whenever he was, he would chase fly balls, and he didn't seem to understand there was a wall there, and he would literally run headfirst into a wall. And he played recklessly in general, and he ruined his career with injuries. And the Dodgers actually had a hand in this because he'd be willing to play even though he had double vision and dizziness. And Leo DeRocher, the Dodger manager, would say, "Get out there, kid," and Pete would say, "Okay, boss." And
I wonder how many concussions he had. Yeah.
Some people say like 11, something like that. And he went from being National League batting champion to just sort of being this guy who could only occasionally pinch hit or pinch run because he just battered himself up so badly. So that's been my main focus lately, and then just putting things out. I have a YouTube channel with old baseball clips. That's where you can find the Lou Gehrig called shot clip.
Yeah.
But also I have interviews with people like Honus Wagner and Ty Cobb and other material. On there that I think any fan of baseball history would enjoy.
Awesome. When will the Pete Reiser book be complete? No pressure.
I'm probably about 80 or 90% done at this point.
Awesome.
I'm just trying to fill in some holes. I talked to his daughter for the book, and
nice.
got some rare photos. So I'm really happy with the way it's turning out.
Well, Dan, it's been great to have you on again. Do have to go. So
okay.
Hopefully to have you back
Good
with the Pete Reiser book. All right.
Yes.
Yep. All right, we've been talking to Dan Joseph about Lou Gehrig Day, June 2nd, 2021. This has been the Sunbury Press Book Show on the BookSpeak Network. Be sure to check out our books at www.sunburypress.com or search for our titles on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers worldwide. If you enjoyed this podcast, there are hundreds more available on the BookSpeak Network. You can find our channel on blogtalkradio.com. Thank you for listening.